So, my friends, there are three big stories for today. Actually, I have a couple little tiny pieces that don't really count at the very end, and I have some memes to show you as well. But my three big stories start with Putin and Trump's phone call and then goes to look at what the Europeans' reaction is, and then we'll look at what the Russians' reaction is to this very same phone call. Now, I think that Putin got what he wanted. I think there's universal agreement about that Putin got what he wanted. I think Trump also got what he wanted. Which would you say, well, how can you say that? Doesn't he want to have a peace deal? No. I think that Putin wants to keep the war going and Trump doesn't want to have to deal with it. I'll show you what I mean in just a moment. Stay with me here. My name is Gerdes. I'm just a professor trying to provide context in the war in Ukraine. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. Okay, so let's start here. Donald Trump's strange reluctance to get tough with Putin. Well, the only thing that seems to really explain this is that he doesn't want to. He's reluctant to get tough with Putin. That's what's explaining his reluctance. He doesn't want to do it. What does Trump really want? He promised turkey time, toughness with Putin, but he delivered only more talk, no consequences. That's according to The Economist. Trump calls the war a bloodbath, but he seems blind to the reality that just wooing Mr. Putin will not stop it. He doesn't want to harm the relationship with Putin. He doesn't want to run afoul. And I think his strategy here now has morphed into, I want to keep this chummy relationship with Putin and let the Europeans do what the Europeans are going to do. And I'm just trying to be, a fair, honest broker. And then when it's all over, we'll have all these great deals and Europe won't get the deal. I think that's what's going on in Trump's mind. I'm not in his mind. I don't know. Tell me what you think about that. Does that sound realistic to you? Because that's explanatory where everything that he's saying he's trying to do is not. Okay, Russia is trying to buy time to continue the war, says Zelensky. I think Putin believes that. I think Zelensky believes that. Trump might even believe that. But he's not doing anything about it. Lithuania's defense minister didn't hold back on Trump's latest call with Putin. She says it's starting to feel like a broken record. Same hopeful tone, same promises of progress, but no actual change on the ground. Quote, Putin is just buying time. If we want real results, it's not more talk that we need, it's tougher sanctions, unquote. And we'll see what the Europeans just did with that in just a moment. Okay, Putin's plan is to capture Donbass in 2025, despite not capturing it 2022, 2023, or 2024. I talked about that this morning in this video. Putin's four oblasts fantasy, it's laughable. And I show you how, and credit out to one of my viewers who actually did the math, calculating like how much territory was remaining, how much was left, and how long it would take. You got to watch this video. I cover all the normal morning events, but that's the headline here. It's improbable that he's going to get through that in 2025 or even 2026, or even just watch the video. You'll see what I'm talking about. Okay. Here, Trump thinks he struck a deal with Putin. He doesn't realize the KGB men don't make deals. Now, I think he does, but I think he's not actually trying to make the deal. Like I've kind of shifted my position here, and I think he wants Europe to just be the bad guys dealing with Putin, and he wants to stay on Putin's good side. They don't bargain because they don't take steps back. For them, negotiations mean taking the other side, or making the other side believe that a compromise has been reached and that it's time to retreat. But instead of taking a step back, Russia takes a step forward into the space that has just been vacated. Everyone is losing from the continuation of war. But Russia believes, this is now how you should frame how Putin is thinking about it, Russia believes it is losing less than others. The West still doesn't understand Russian logic of a negative sum game. So we talk about a positive sum game where, if you get some, I don't get it. And it's only a zero sum game is like that. And we're thinking in positive terms of like distributing the pie. Here they're trying to distribute the pain. Negative sum game. It is a goal to enter into an interaction in which everyone suffers, but Russia would suffer less than the rest. That's an interesting way of thinking about it. Here's what Trump had to say. I'm going to show you the very beginning and the very end so that you can hear his thinking.
Very big egos involved, I tell you. Big egos involved, but I think something's going to happen.
Okay, this is right after his talk with Putin, or a little while after his talk with Putin.
And if it doesn't, I'd just back away and they're going to have to keep going.
He wants out. He wants out. He doesn't want to have to broker the deal. He doesn't want to be the bad guy. He doesn't want to inflict more pain on his buddy Putin. Like, that's how he sees Putin. That's someone he has a very good relationship with.
Again, this was a European situation. It should have remained a European situation. Should have remained, but we have, because the past administration felt very strongly that we should be involved, that we got involved much more than Europe did in terms of...
Yeah. You know where he's going to go with that. Let's skip over to the end where he says this.
I think that he wants to stop. He's, not... It's a very bad thing that's happening over there. I think he wants to stop. But I could answer that question better in 2 weeks or 4 weeks from now.
Just kick the can down the road. I can answer it later on. I don't think he can. Over 60% of Americans believe that Putin is playing games and stalling in peace negotiations involving the United States, despite President Trump's expressions of trust in Vladimir Putin. Yeah, I mean, the American people aren't deceived by that. They can see this pretty clearly, well, for the most part. There's a minority that just believes whatever Trump is saying. All Putin ever wanted from the U.S. was for it to do nothing, and he's getting that. And Trump is doing nothing. Trump says he will not impose more sanctions on Russia. Why? You threaten more sanctions if they didn't come to the table, but they're not coming to the table, and you're not doing anything. You're letting the Europeans be the bad guy, and I'll show you that in just a moment. Wait, so if Putin is refusing to make peace, the United States will say this is not our war and walk away? Does Vance not understand that this is exactly what Putin wants us to do? This isn't a threat, it's an incentive. Absolutely spot on. That's a great commentary. It is an incentive, but the incentive is flowing both ways. Vance and Trump don't want to be involved in this either. Okay. Phone call between Trump and Putin looks like a clear defeat for the American president, according to Sky News. That's how it's being seen over in Britain. European leaders are stunned by Trump's account of the call with Putin, according to the Financial Times. Yeah, because it's seeing like, wait a minute, aren't you supposed to be the president of the United States? Like, you're supposed to be this powerful entity, but it's not happening because he doesn't want to go down that path. Russians continue to bomb our cities, killing women and children. European leaders are stunned as it becomes clear that the American president is now solely focused not on ending the war, but on rekindling his personal business with Russia. Yeah, I think that's what it is. He's looking toward that future on the other side. And now I criticized the slow walking in the Biden administration for doing this as well, and people rebuke me for that. I think that was true then, that there were some forces that were looking to the other side of the war to think about this, and so I criticized some Europeans for thinking about this as well, and I'm criticizing Trump for this. I'm equally criticizing the Biden administration that was thinking about the other side, about the reset button. I'm criticizing the Trump administration, and I've criticized in the past Europeans for doing this very same thing, but I think this is what Trump is doing. Okay. Zelensky said he asked Trump not to make decisions about Ukraine without us before U.S. president held a call with Putin. I understand Zelensky's concern, but more and more I'm starting to think that's not really a problem. He doesn't want to make the decisions. He doesn't want to be part of this. He doesn't want to have his hands in it. He only has his hands in it because he inherited it, and he's saying, well, this is what Biden did, and we're right. There are matters of principle for us are very important. And yeah, Zelensky, I get it. He's right. Zelensky is spot on. The U.S. should make decisions without him. But I don't think Trump wants to even make the decisions. Okay. Over the past 20 years, listen to Ben Shapiro. I know some of you're new to Ben Shapiro, but he's one of the few conservative voices that has really picked up on this and is now pushing for Ukraine and against Russia.
So again, it's going to be very unclear as to what happens from here. But it should be made clear at this point that Vladimir Putin does not actually want anything like a negotiated peace that sets the lines where they are. He does not want that. Vladimir Putin believes the United States will eventually walk away. And hell, if you were Vladimir Putin, you'd probably believe that too. The United States has, over the course of the last 20 years, walked away from the Kurds, the Afghans, the people of Hong Kong, and now maybe the people of Ukraine. So why wouldn't they? I mean, really, like that is the game that Vladimir Putin is playing. He's playing the long game here. The United States is going to have to play a similarly long game if we actually wish for Vladimir Putin not to take over the entirety of Ukraine.
Okay, yeah, he's getting it, and he's one of the few conservative voices that is out there, and I hope we see more of those. Okay, now what are the Europeans doing? Well, Chancellor Merz talked about how on the 20th, yesterday was the 19th, when Trump had this phone call, and on the 20th they were going to talk about sanctions. Chancellor Merz confirmed that the EU will intensify sanctions on Russia, aligning with the U.S. after Trump's call with Putin. Merz emphasized Europe's united stance and commitment to supporting Ukraine toward a ceasefire. Okay, but did they do sanctions? Yes. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas announced on 20 May that the bloc has approved new sanctions against Russia that focus on maritime assets used to circumvent previous restrictions. So there is another new sanctions package. So thank you to the EU. You're getting this right. That's great. The UK has also expanded its sanctions against Russia, adding dozens of individuals, entities, and vessels from the Shadow Fleet. Among those targeted in the St. Petersburg is the St. Petersburg currency exchange. Okay. And then we saw this. The EU has approved its 17th sanctions package, nearly 200 Shadow Fleet ships targeted, plus new measures. And then it said this: the longer Russia's war continues, the stronger our answer, according to the High Representative, Kaja Kallas. Okay, great. I'm glad to see all of that. Now, here's what she was talking about, because she was talking about, like, we kind of all need to work together on this.
Yes, this is true. We need everybody on board, and we know that America is also working with the sanctions for Russia if they don't agree. And we have seen clearly from the call yesterday that they don't agree. And of course, we are democracies. It takes time, and it is difficult and becoming more difficult. But I don't think we have a choice. We need to put more pressure.
Yeah, so that was a very diplomatic way of saying the U.S. isn't really doing much more, but we have to work together. Democracies take time. They're going at their own pace. Okay, so I don't see forthcoming new sanctions from Trump anytime soon because he doesn't want to do it. Although I also don't see him repealing it anytime soon because the pressure would be too much to repeal, at least in the short term. So we'll see how that plays out. Now, with all that being done, Europe targets over 350 tankers in Russia's Shadow Fleet to choke off oil revenues fueling the war. In response, a Russian-linked tanker defied NATO orders in the Baltic, prompting a naval standoff. So I read the article. It got almost hot. Like, when you look at what happened, so then a jet arrived. Okay, so they try to stop this thing. They're helicopters. A Russian jet arrives. After approaching, the ship refused to identify itself and ignored orders from Estonia's Navy to halt and change course. Estonian patrol ships, helicopters, and patrol aircraft responded, with footage confirming the NATO response. So there was a NATO response. However, as NATO vessels prepared to board the Jaguar for inspection, the Russian Air Force dispatched a Su-35 fighter jet to the ship's position in a show of force. So what? Yeah, it's getting hot here. According to the Estonian defense officials, the Russian jet circled the tanker and signaled a clear intention to prevent any potential boarding or seizure immediately. The planned boarding operation was called as NATO captains and commanders assessed the risk of triggering a direct military clash as too high. So guess what? Russia won. Russia won that one. I mean, that's what that amounts to. They stared down the NATO forces that were going to inspect that ship to see if it was a sanctioned vessel that was going. Yeah. So there we are. Okay, a couple other points of news, and then I want to get to some memes. Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov held talks with Raytheon to bolster air defenses. That's the producer of the Patriot systems, the only weapons capable of intercepting Russian ballistic missiles. They have a very, very hard time hitting ballistic missiles. Belgium is also ready to send troops to Ukraine as part of the coalition of the willing led by France. They're working on a plan and they're working very closely together. We're pretty much there. So I think that it's evolving in the right direction. At the moment that there is a ceasefire, we can immediately operate with the coalition of the willing on Ukrainian soil, they said. Okay. Now, how Europe is seeing what happened with this phone call. Europe wakes up and is stunned of the news of Trump's utter humiliation at the hands of the Russian dictator. Now, how is Russia seeing it? Well, here's Sputnik. Let's see what Sputnik had to say. Three Trump drops bombshell on Putin call, excellent tone, and massive future trade deals. Russia and Ukraine must negotiate directly. No outsiders. Trump claims Moscow is ready to go big on U.S. deals once the conflict ends. And Trump already looped in Ukraine's leaders and allies and told them about that. So they're seeing it like everything went their way. This is great times. Here's how it is in the Russian newspaper. Steve Rosenberg of the BBC. Let's listen to a bit of this.
What are today's Russian papers saying about the latest telephone conversation between Presidents Putin and Trump? Clearly, Kommersant believes the call went very well for the Kremlin. It quotes President Putin as saying Russia agreed to work on a memorandum about a possible future peace agreement, defining a number of positions. Possible and future make it all sound rather vague. And that's the whole point. As the paper says, this way Russia wins extra time and an unspecified time frame.
And remember, Putin thinks that he can grab up more real estate, which is pretty unrealistic to grab what he thinks he can grab. Again, go back to that video and do this in this time and have an extra edge.
While negotiations take place on agreeing the principles of a memorandum about something that's possible in the future, and that defines a number of positions. And Russia will use this time as it sees fit. The paper quotes Putin as saying, the conversation with Trump was very constructive. I rate it highly.
That's all you need to know. Putin rates it highly. Okay. Darth Putin, the parody site, we will support Ukraine to achieve victory. Then we will support Ukraine for as long as it takes. Then we will support Ukraine to achieve a ceasefire. Then thank you for my $2 million a year job at Rosneft, Comrade Putin. Like, okay, so this, like a $2 million a year job won't move Trump really, right? But the idea is the trade deals that are involved, or the deals, the we're going to get so hugely rich, that kind of talk. That's really where it has gone in the most recent times. And then you have other memes like the Titanic kind of meme that, and then you see something like this. Number of legally binding trade agreements signed by the Trump administration. And you see this over time. And it was promised 90 deals in 90 days. Well, Gary Kasparov said it's only up from here. So that's not working so well. You could do the same thing with peace deals, exact same kind of thing, or peace ceasefires or whatever. And it's only up from here. All right, my friends, that's all that I have for you right now. Thank you for your time, the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.